therapy. Okay, clinics in the in the ID clinics, whereby we focus on those living with HIV and on ART. And then I was thinking how we can actually improve the clinical practice and while doing research, and to address those unanswered questions that we've seen in the clinics during the daily practice. And I believe that there is a direct impact of research on how we can care and manage for patients with infections.
Yeah, keep talking.
Okay. Is that good? Okay. Oh, good. Okay. So how did I first get involved with research? I raised my intention to do PhD to my ClinPharm research project supervisor at that time. And coincident, he just finished and completed his PhD at Monash University as well. And very kind of him, he shared his experience in doing PhD and also his contact at Monash University. And from there, I approached and started initial conversation with the potential supervisor at the pharmacy school who have interest in ID setting, which is David Gong. And then another aspect which is quite important is to be able to secure the scholarship to support my PhD study in Australia as well. And then during my PhD studies, managed to have the opportunities to work with ID clinicians and clinical microbiologists such as Monica Slaving and also Sharon Chen, who are the expert in fungal infections. And that is how I get myself involved in medical mycology research. So how do research can benefit my career? So I would say engaging in research can hone like critical skills such as like problem solving, analytical thinking, and as well as learning new skill in data analysis and conducting research, which I think is valuable for your professional development. And of course, able to publish your research finding, your work leads to recognition in your in the field that you are working at, and open up the opportunities for further collaboration, networking, career advancement, as well as invitation to give talk at international conferences. So another thing is to be able to contribute to the advancement of the knowledge in the field of interest, and especially when your research work is cited by clinical practice guideline, and it can actually translatable to like clinical practice, which is like personally I find fulfilling and also professionally rewarding. So not going to paint it as doing a research or PhD as a walk in the park because always there are challenges. But if you are considering this path, I would advise you like to think about what your passion is, and then that you find rewarding and that you can derive satisfaction from, because these are very important that you would need when you have all the challenges coming to your way. So with this, I'm going to end with a quote for Oprah Winfrey, which is passion is energy that keeps us sailing through the challenges and also drive us towards the goal, whatever that you wanted to achieve in research. So I think that's all. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Zoe. That was a fantastic overview of basically a really excellent career so far and what really can be achieved by a research pharmacist. Does anyone have any questions for Zoe about any aspects of her research? We've got clapping. Michelle? Yep,
Oh,
sorry, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. So interesting. Not only did you pursue an academic career, but you also moved countries, and I find that's a lot of passion and commitment. Can you can you tell me, like, how did you what sparked the PhD pathway? Like, that made you, was it, were you tapped on the shoulder to pursue a PhD, or did you go out and find your contacts
Oh,
because you really wanted to do further, research in that area?
I would say the second one because I've been working in the hospital for 2 years, and I feel like I wanted to go further, like to learn more. So that's why I started with the M Clean Farm first, and then from there I do a small research dissertation that caught me into, like, okay, I have an interest to do research and I really want to pursue more than a master degree. So that's why I going to ask around how I can actually have the opportunities to do PhD. Whether at that time I also consider locally as well, and also doing overseas. Yeah, but I think, of course, one of the important aspect, as I mentioned just now, like for me as an international students, I really need to have the scholarship to come to be able to do a PhD here. So one thing, that is one of the very crucial aspect. I think without the scholarship, I won't be coming.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. And
That's one question.
I'll repeat
That.
the question.
Yeah.
The question was about how you go about getting a PhD scholarship. Was it through Monash or elsewhere otherwise?
Yes.
Yeah.
I got it from within it's actually by the Malaysian governments. And then there's a few avenues that you can apply for scholarship. There's like annual award by the Australian governments, and also at the university levels. We also have like scholarship offered by the university and even the school level as well.
I think someone was typing something, but maybe not. Okay, any other questions online or in the audience? Right. Excellent. Well,
Yep.
otherwise, well, thank you, Zoe. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Excellent talk. Okay, so next up we have Nicole C. He is an AMS-ID pharmacist at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre and through the NCIC. And his research interests are in AMS and infections in immunocompromised hosts, with a particular focus on neutropenic fever. And so thanks, Nicole, for talking today.
So apologies to those online. I know the camera's view is not amazing, but laptop's sort of stopping us from getting that angle correct. So I might step a bit further back so you can see me. Okay, so whoops. Okay. All right. What was that? Sorry. Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes, that's what the share button is. Oh, we've got. Oh, great. Oof. There we go. Okay, we got there, guys. Alrighty, thanks for the introduction, Abby. So yeah, my name's Nikhil. I'm an AMS pharmacist here at Peter Mac, and also a research pharmacist with the NCIC. And today I've titled my talk "Taking the Plunge." We just heard Zoe talk, who's a postdoc, done all these things, and I'm in comparison very, very early in my career. So I'm winding things right back here, and hoping this will apply to people who are not yet sort of delved into research but are thinking about it. So my journey, like many others probably here, began at Monash University, just down the road where I did my undergraduate degree. Luckily got an internship at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, also just across the road, where I spent quite a bit of time as a clinical pharmacist. And during this time, I did the Royal Melbourne Hospital residency, which would, back then there wasn't an SHPA residency, but it's pretty much the same thing. And I had my first taste of research doing a project that looked at the impact of missed medication doses in hospital inpatients. And these, at this time, our projects were allocated to us. We didn't get to choose them, and you didn't actually have a mentor that would run you through it. So you're kind of on your own to um, do the protocol, do the data collection tool, collect the data, etc. So needless to say, I didn't love research back then, but I went on to do a grad cert in pharmacy practice where one of the assignments was to write up a case report on a patient who had a drug reaction. I happened to come across a patient that had a autoimmune colitis and diabetes due to pembrolizumab, and I managed to actually publish that too. So that kind of got me my first sort of taste of research. I then wanted to do a master's of clinical pharmacy, which I think for me, I guess helped consolidate some of the clinical knowledge that I gained as a pharmacist doing specialty rotations already at that point in time. But I do regret, and I think this is a learning point I want to sort of bring to everyone here that's thinking of doing a master's is I kind of regret not doing a research project within that structured environment where you do have a mentor. I think I felt a little bit overwhelmed at the idea of it. But looking back, I think it actually would have been a good stepping stone for me personally. So I've painted a pretty grim picture of research so far. So where did this all turn around? So I had specialty rotations at the Royal Melbourne in ICU. I became hematology BMT trained, and then I also spent quite a while in infectious diseases. And during these rotations in 2019 in ICU, we were actively recruiting patients into the Bling trial. If you aren't in ID circles or crit care circles, you might not know what it is. Just got published. It's been talked about at every journal club, probably everywhere. But it made me really interested in this idea that was being proposed about versus, continuous infusion versus intermittent infusions, which one's better, and also seeing Jason Roberts, a pharmacist, sort of leading the way in this area, really made me think about, it's kind of cool being a clinician researcher and seeing those complement one another. Then I went to hematology, and there was this study called Pippin that was actively recruiting. By our very own Abby Douglas, who's here today. And again, I thought this is a really interesting clinical question about the role of PET-CT scan in patients who have persistent or recurrent neutropenic fever and seeing if that influences antimicrobial management. And then lastly, I spent a long time in ID where I got to work side by side with Professor Steve Tong, who at that time had just published a study called Camera 2, which I was just fanboying over. But basically what I'm trying to say is like these experiences in these specialty rotations made me appreciate the role of research and how that influences our on the floor decisions when it comes to patient care. And it's something that I really wanted to potentially get involved in. I'm not saying I want to run a clinical trial now, but having a discussion back then with Steve Tong about his research, and you can see that everyone who gets to this point have very humble beginnings where they start with something small, then they build over time. So anyway, following that, I did want to dip my feet into things other than just being a ward pharmacist. So I happened to get the backfill AMS position at the Royal Melbourne, stayed in there for a couple of years, and during that time got seconded to the guidance group over at the National Centre of Antimicrobial Stewardship, also across the road. I've stayed in Parkville forever, guys. It's odd. But that's where I got a taste of what it's like to work in an environment where research is really part of the day-to-day workflows, essentially. Went on to do a secondment with Safer Care Victoria, where I got some skills in improvement coaching and quality improvement. And I implemented a project at Royal Melbourne where we started a penicillin allergy delabeling process, essentially. And then also following that, I did a bit of time as a quality and research pharmacist. So in those years, I gained a lot of new skills. I learned about quality improvement, digital innovation with the guidance group, interdisciplinary collaboration, planning interventions, measuring the impact of those interventions. And that really made me realize that I want to start applying these skills in a research context. And luckily for me, I saw there was a research fellow positioned opened at Peter Mac, NCIC. Managed to get that, and then following that, an AMS pharmacist position opened up, and I now juggle both of those roles. So far, what have I done during my time at the NCIC? Published 2 reviews in areas of interest for me. So one being pros and cons of fluoroquinolone prophylaxis in neutropenic patients. and the other being an approach to diagnostic evaluation and a workup to prevent invasive fungal disease in patients that are going to get allo transplants. And as Abby mentioned, I am sort of focusing a bit of my research at the moment on neutropenic fever, having done a national survey of current practices, but also looking back at 10 years worth of data submitted to the NAPS platform. So my next steps moving forward for me will probably be a PhD, probably music to Kaz's ears. But yeah, I guess yeah, you tell yeah. I can't. Yeah, for people online, Kaz said, yeah, you can run, but you can't hide, and the next slide had her face on it. So my advice to anyone here today is I could probably speak a while on this, so I need to keep it short. But be as proactive as you can. Engage in multiple different forums, whether that be SHPA, social media, following your favorite sort of consultants or specialist physicians, pharmacists, etc. Go to seminars, go to all your consultant ward rounds, journal clubs, unit meetings, and people will start to know who you are and opportunities arise. And for me personally, how I actually ended up where I was I was a hematology pharmacist at the Royal Melbourne. And every Thursday we had a joint hematology ID ward round, and Professor Karen Thursky would attend those ward rounds. And that's how she got to know me. And then we crossed paths again when I was an AMS pharmacist. And yeah, she's the one that tapped me on the shoulder about the guidance job and then the NCIC job. And that's how I got here. So seize those opportunities when they come. Like I know once you engage your stakeholders and they present you with opportunity, it might be scary because it's a foreign sort of project to you. But saying yes really can open up a lot of doors, and especially if you have mentorship. And I think that's what I really value at the moment. Being with the NCIC, I've got not just Kaz, but many other mentors who helped me through my research, Abby being one of them, Gab Hausler, many others, and even all the pharmacists that are going to be speaking today. So those would be my big three tips moving forward. And with that, I'll probably end my presentation and open the floor up to questions.
Thanks so much, Nicole, for a very engaging talk and slightly entertaining towards the end of that joke. All right, now I need to get out of this, don't I?
Oh, sorry, I should have probably done that.
Yeah, okay. All right. And we'll go back to Zoom. Maybe stop share. Stop share. Okay, here we are. Hello, everyone online and in the physical audience. Do we have any questions for Nicole at this point? Michelle has a question.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, don't want to. Just what advice do you have, Nicole, if you're not within the precinct and you don't come across research mentors? Just like you said, your first experience with research wasn't so positive. So what if you're from a sort of a peripheral centre? Is there any things you can join or forums that you can join that might help?
Can you hear those questions? Yeah.
Okay. That's a great question, Michelle. I don't know if I actually know all the best forums for that, considering I was very lucky to be in the Parkville precinct. But I can imagine these positions do get advertised on certain forums, and making sure you follow all the centres that you might be willing to work with. But yeah, actually, sorry, I've got a terribly answered question, but
Kaz?
yeah, Kaz is coming to save me. So
No. What I was going to say is, I think the single most important thing is to actually find a mentor for yourself. I think put your hand up for those of you who've done it. It's very important to have a mentor, isn't it? And it's more than a mentor. We talk about mentorship and sponsorship. You need to be in an environment where someone will put you forward to do something new, which is not just mentorship. If you are not in that environment, it's actually really hard. So you have to somehow get yourself into a role or a job, move organisations to get somewhere where you know that you will be sponsored. If that happens, then the road can be relatively straightforward. We will talk a little bit later, I hope, around part-time versus full-time PhDs and how you can get roles where you can combine the two, and Anna's probably a great example of that. but just, you know, there are so many different ways to do a PhD, and it's not suddenly becoming a poor student earning 47,000 tax-free. There are many ways. And in fact, we know that with nursing, allied health and pharmacy, almost all of you are advanced practice, almost all of you are in roles it's hard to come away from. So almost all of you would probably be doing a sort of a combined role. So we know we've had our team had a lot of experience here, both with NCAS and here in how to create really, really nice pharmacist career research pathways, I think. So at the end tonight, I hope you get that sense of what it could be like. But if you are in an environment where there is no opportunity, then you do have to think about how you're going to do it.
Thanks, Kaz. We have a question from Phoebe Capone.
Hi, sorry, can you?
Yeah.
Hi.
How you going?
Yeah, so I'm Phoebe. I'm an antimicrobial stewardship pharmacist. We've actually just recently I work at a rural hospital, but we've actually just recently released some guidelines and implemented like a direct oral penicillin challenge and delabeling, and also some medication like desensitization policies, which are starting to come into effect. You sort of briefly mentioned that you worked a little bit in that space, and I just sort of wanted to see if you had any tips on how to, I really like to translate, what I'm doing into that research area, because I think it would be really good to sort of tap into the how does it go in like a rural setting.
Yeah, I probably have a few tips. I think we could probably arrange a time to discuss because it might take a while. It's quite a lot to go over. Are you at a Victorian site?
Yeah,
Oh,
Northeast
fantastic.
Queensland
Have you heard about
yeah.
the Safer Care are running another program that hospitals can sign up to? Are you participating?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I can tell you about my experiences if you want to email me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And also, we have a very direct line to Jason Tribbiano, so who you might want to talk to over myself. So there's that.
Yes.
The direct line to everyone involved with the safer care stuff too.
Awesome.
So I think, I mean, just from what you've said, Phoebe, as well, I think I've been involved with the allergy delabeling as well. And I think what probably is a unique aspect that you have is the rural experience, because, applying these models at different settings is different. And so it can be novel to have that perspective, and that can be publishable as far as how you apply something in one setting to another. So yeah, and I'm sure Jason Tribbiano would be very interested in talking to you about that, because he would be right on the front foot of looking at the different models, if you like. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phoebe. Any other questions for Nicole? Excellent. Well, thanks, Nicole. Thanks so much. Okey-dokey. So next up we have Violet Zhu, who is a co-lead AMS ID pharmacist at Eastern Health in Victoria, and she's a PhD student, I think a newly minted PhD student, so she's taken the plunge. And she's doing her PhD through the NCIC on the topic of antiviral stewardship. So a bit of a different spectrum. In particular, looking at antivirals used in CMV. So I'd be very interested to hear your experience so far, Violet. Just have to get the sharing happening.
Yeah, share screen.
You shared screen and it worked well, Nicholas. So I'm going to do it. It's just, I think this mouse is a bit dicky.
No,
Oh, okay.
what is the office problem? But play it and then we'll just duplicate screens.
Okay.
Thanks, Violet. Is it okay on Zoom? Oh,
fantastic. I didn't want to spoil any of my jokes by having everyone see what was coming. So thanks, Abby, for the introduction, and thanks so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. So as Abby said, my name's Violet. I'm an AMS ID pharmacist in Victoria, and I am 8 days into my PhD at NCIC. So, but when I was making this presentation, I feel like who am I is a bit of an existential question. So I just want to say this is me as my career, but I'm a few other things. I'm my parents' favorite child. I am their only child, but it's not really relevant. I'm a good friend, and I couldn't find a reference to this, so you have to take my word for it. And I'm also a subpar triathlete, so you can check my Strava or speak to my coach about that one. So this is just a brief kind of training overview in word form. I feel like you could probably find this on my LinkedIn, so I thought I'd tell my story just through pictures. And Nikhil's told me very excitingly that there's a few people from interstate on tonight. So I'm actually from Brisbane, so that's the brown snake, aptly named, and the site for the 2030 Olympics. And I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Queensland, so at the Pharmacy Australia Centre of Excellence, or PACE. And part of the undergraduate degree meant that I was able to do my last year as an honours year through the Institute for Molecular Bioscience. So I always kind of knew I wanted to do something in ID. I just loved ID. So my honours project was in the in vitro nephrotoxicity of aminoglycosides. But it was mostly actually a cell lab-based honours year, which was extremely fun and kind of gave me my taste for what postgraduate research was like and what it's like to kind of work with different craft groups and people. But unfortunately, I broke both my hands playing sport in that last year, so wasn't really able to look after my cell cultures as well as they probably deserved. But after this year, I did kind of want to delve into the clinical space, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a job in Queensland, so I applied far and wide and finally found someone who would take me, which led me down to Melbourne. Sorry, I couldn't get my head to line up on that plane, so I arrived safely without a puffer jacket, and that's actually not a joke. I did bring a puffer jacket. So it was very cold, and I started my kind of clinical career at Maroondah Hospital in Eastern Health, which allowed me to get a position at the Royal Melbourne Hospital as part of their foundation residency program, so quite similar to Nikhil. And part of this involved a clinical project, which again had an antibiotic or infectious diseases flavour, but was actually with the inflammatory bowel disease team and the colorectal teams at the Royal Melbourne, which was really exciting. It was really interesting working with surgeons and other physicians in different craft groups. So it was, really enjoyable experience. And part of my time at the Royal Melbourne as well meant that I was able to cover a backfill as well with Nikhil. So this is us in 2021. Look how happy we are. But it also meant that I was just able to meet kind of all these people, a lot of them who are here today in the infectious diseases space, and kind of is what led us here today. And that's just as an aside, I also did the grad cert and pharm prac just in the infectious diseases subject. So how did I get into research? Well, I think the seed had been planted pretty early that I'd wanted to pursue a PhD in infectious diseases. So it just meant that I had asked a lot of questions of pretty much everyone who I'd known been doing one. And I feel like I'm known for asking questions. So this is just as a little screen cap from a card that one of my career mentors, Sonia Koenig, has written. So effectively any clinicians, so not just doctors or pharmacists, but physios, social workers, people in the implementation science space, I'd ask them why they wanted to do a PhD, how they found their project, who were their supervisors, which institute did they do it, why, did they have any advice to me? And it kind of just linked in with putting my ear to the ground around things. So I think Nikhil had kind of touched on some of this, but I'd signed up to notifications for potential research projects at all the various institutes throughout the country. I followed people on interest on Twitter and X, and so I feel like you can kind of get a bit of a feel for people's personalities and their research areas from that. So I also joined like professional groups that were relevant to my area. So even if you're not an infectious diseases person, there's also like, in the cancer space, etc. And you often would get notifications around potential PhD projects through things like OSBUG or the SHPA practice groups. And then I went to kind of things like Nite, so going to these in-person education events and chatting to people, putting yourself out there, making your intentions known, and I feel like that is kind of what's led me here today. So I am back here, and as Kaz said, you can have a clinician research kind of combination. So I still hold a clinical time at Eastern Health, doing AMS ID there. But I do spend a lot of my time in the Parkville precinct too, with the Royal Melbourne Hospital and Peter Mac, and yep, that's me with the sign out the front. And I guess all of that meant that I was able to find this research project. So Nikhil is actually the one who had forwarded the project to me. So these are my two PhD supervisors. So the PhD project was an anti-CMV antiviral stewardship. So just as a bit of background, cytomegalovirus. It's a common infection that causes significant morbidity and mortality in immunocompromised hosts. And currently the management with antiviral therapy is challenging. There's a lot of toxicities, there's antiviral resistance. So this area of antiviral stewardship is an emerging area of interest. So one of the projects is, again, a clinical-based project just around evaluating the antiviral stewardship program here at the Parkville precinct. So what impact do I think that research will have on my career? And so career satisfaction, I'm sure, is important to everyone here, but I feel like I think about it a lot. Like I really, really think about it. So I'm a big fan of the 80,000 hours kind of organization, which is just around you spend 80,000 hours of your life at work. So I think research to me fulfills a lot of those criteria about what I think my ideal career would be. So a lot of opportunities to improve the skill set that I feel like a lot of the other people have touched on tonight. But, just how to actually read an article. I feel like I haven't probably read an academic article outside of a journal club in great depth, and how to present and collaborate and make great animations for PowerPoints, and but also around kind of working on things long term, so that outside of that kind of 3 to 6 month project thing, working on something that lasts a few years, and obviously the opportunity to meet everyone here today and travel and things like that. I've also just highlighted the unknown because I feel like, I don't know, that's the most exciting part about life. And I feel like possibly most exciting thing about doing a PhD as well. So you never really know what's around the corner. I put here as well just some things around kind of freedom and flexibility. I have a lot of hobbies. A lot of those hobbies depend on the weather. Melbourne is not very forgiving. So it just means that instead of exercising at 5:30 in the morning, I can probably do it at 7 a.m. So with those dark winters, and not having to be on a ward at 8 a.m. or 8:30, ready to go. And I've also put here that I'm a night owl. So I think my best work's probably after 7 p.m. So I feel like, that's one of the positives for me. And I am very early on, so obviously quite optimistic. I'd be interested to see the differences between this talk and in a year's time. But I feel like financial is probably one of the points that we have to discuss, at least early in your career. But there are a lot of, I guess, scholarship opportunities and having that kind of clinician portfolio, but it also means you can kind of pick up your weekend shifts and on-call as well. And I've also put the unknown. So yeah, thanks so much. If you have any questions, or if you're not feeling brave enough to ask the questions in front of everyone, you can also contact me directly, or add me on Strava. So yes, thanks. Hi, Michelle.
Michelle has a question.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a clap. Hilarious.
Oh, no, sorry.
Right,
Now
sorry.
you must invent a question.
Yeah.
I'm going to invent a question. Thanks, Violet, for giving us all this background to you. You've been a wonderful addition to the team, and you should probably add funnies, bad jokes, and sourcing banh mi's in your repertoire of skills that you'll gain
True.
during PhD.
Any questions in the audience?
Yeah, hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sounds good. Yep.
Hi, Sam.
Hey, thanks for the presentation. Nice to hear from another Brisbaneite. I guess I'm curious as to where you hope or where you think that the PhD pathway might lead you. Do you plan on a career as a clinician researcher, or do you have sort of other aspirations?
Damn, that is such a good question. I think about this a lot, but I don't know. I feel like, and this is probably just reflective of my life as a whole, but like I don't like to think too far ahead because I find that sometimes you can box yourself in. But I feel like at the moment, you know, being a clinician and being a researcher is kind of always what I really wanted to do. I was just saying to like one of the audience members before, like even as an undergrad, I was like, I want to have a career where I can do 2 days clinical, 2 days research, and 1 day education. And I'm not a huge fan of education anymore, but I feel like the other parts are parts like, you know, I feel like that's kind of what I've always wanted to do, and I feel like it feels right for me so far. But again, if you ask me this question in a year's time, the answer could be very different. So
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, got a question in the audience.
so the question, what was your name? Heather. So Heather's just asked, how did you find the process of enrolling into a PhD? I feel like arduous is probably the best word. It's a lot of paperwork and you know, trying to pull references and well, actually the reference is probably the easy part, but it's like just trying to pull your paperwork and all your marks and everything like that. It was definitely very tricky from just the actual admin enrolling part. But finding the project and stuff was probably, yeah, I feel like I'd always have my blinkers on, was just waiting for the right moment. So yeah. How's something to say?
Yeah, look, what I'm going to say, might not go down very well with your college, but look, we've just found that there are different ways to enroll into a PhD. So it doesn't mean you have to enroll into the Faculty of Pharmacy, actually. And I found that our PhDs that go through there, it's actually really quite strict and structured. If you, for example, if you come in as a PhD, you go through the Department of Oncology and Hematology, and it's more a it's a brilliant program. You have a mentor, you have structured your PhD meetings are typically. I'll give you an extra. I probably need to know what it looks like, isn't it? So to enrol in a PhD at University of Melbourne or probably Monash, if you want to roll into a PhD at University, there are a few things you need to do. The first is you need to meet what they call H1 equivalency. So H1 equivalency is a combination score that is allocated based on your track record in terms of your position, leadership, publications. If you have any masters by thesis, you get a lot of points. Whereas masters by coursework trips up a few people because you lose a whole lot of points. But then you can take a whole lot of other things into account. You may not reach H1 equivalency, and they might say you don't qualify for a PhD straight up, but we'll let you do an MPhil. So but then you can convert to a PhD. So we got Ron Che, who's one of my fellows over at NCAS. He started up as an MPhil and was approved to continue as a PhD. So not all is lost if you don't get there, right? Because there's different pathways. Depending on that, if you do reach the cutoff for scholarship, you will get a scholarship, a fully funded PhD stipend from the university. If you come under the stipend but reach a certain number, they will still allow you to roll as a PhD, but you may need funding. And you can also at the same time apply for an NHMRC scholarship on Sapphire. So these are all the things that you can do. And if you're unsure about whether you want to commit to a PhD, then it's entirely appropriate to start up with an MPhil, for example, and see how you go. Or get involved in some sort of research project that gets you a couple of publications under your belt, and then that lifts your score again for the next year. So that's it, by the way. Now, when you do if you do get accepted into a PhD, it really a little bit depends on which department you're in and what university you're at in how they run it. But typically what happens is you would have a number of meetings. So if you my other recommendation, strong recommendation, is to get as many, not just one supervisor. So our students have 3, 4, even 5, but at least 3 to 4, because that gives you the best exposure to experts in different areas. And typically the PhD program will require you to have a 6-month progress, a 1-year confirmation. Once you get through that 1-year confirmation, you can actually submit your thesis anytime after that. But typically PhDs go for around about 3 years. And then you can go part-time at any time. And because of the gender equity piece now, there really is a push to have more female students going through and support them in a way that they can actually do it. So I would say it's like a much fairer environment and an understanding of women with care responsibilities or other responsibility as well. So that's basically kind of what you would have to do if you were thinking about it.
Violet's dismissed herself. Thank you so much, Violet. Okay, so next up we have, I think it's Anna. Yes, Anna Kanina is an experienced clinical pharmacist and early career researcher who specializes in quality improvement to optimize antimicrobial prescribing and management of ID in the hospital setting. And she's currently undertaking a PhD in antifungal stewardship in high-risk cancer patients through the NCIC and leading an automated program for surveillance of IFI in cancer patients, linking data from the EMR. Thanks so much, Anna, for your time, and we look forward to your talk. Thanks, Abby. Alice,
Yeah. It'll just be. Oh no, it's good.
Oh, it's good.
Wait,
Okay.
is it looking good on Zoom? Yeah.
I
Oh,
have
okay.
shared it. Yeah. I don't know how to use your computer.
Yeah. And then it's going for
Is that good?
It's going to notes. No duplicate.
Okay. And can you see me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I have a little bit of a timeline. So in 2005, I did my pharmacy undergraduate degree at Monash University. Little bit of a gap for enjoyment of life and working in community pharmacy. But then in 2011, I started working at Peninsula Health as a clinical pharmacist, just general rotations, but I definitely enjoyed infectious diseases and antimicrobial stewardship while I was there, even though I didn't get to directly work in those areas. But in 2015, an opportunity came up at the Alfred to do a clinical pharmacy fellowship in infectious diseases and AMS. So I took on that opportunity. It was a 2-year program where you work in the area and you do your master's at the same time. And at that time, I did a research project around the management of sepsis in Met calls, and eventually, after some time, published that paper, which was a really, really great learning opportunity around data collection, research, engagement with multidisciplinary teams, implementation. There's so many learnings in that experience. It was a difficult 2 years, and it did make me I think I did enjoy it, but it definitely was a lot of work in those 2 years. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Then in 2018, I was appointed as a project officer for the sepsis scaling collaboration at the Alfred. So for that year, we ran a sepsis intervention across the whole hospital, together with 11 or 12 other hospitals in Victoria. And through that, I met Kaz, who seems to be a theme here. And once that was finished, a role came up at the NCIC. There was an NHMRC grant that the team here was awarded. There was a role for an antifungal stewardship project officer. At the time, I didn't really know what that meant, but I thought it was something that could be interesting, and it was time for a change and to try something new. And so not long after I started, Kaz suggested that perhaps a PhD was a good idea, as she has done for others. And then about a year later, I finally succumbed and agreed to do that. Very contagious. So I'll talk a bit about what I do here now. So why did I consider a research path? I think through the research project that I had done around sepsis initially, I really enjoyed working in quality improvement. I felt that I was doing something good and I felt that I was making a difference, which is very important to me. I think why we go into healthcare is because we want to make a difference. We want to, my brother has a really great job. He sells shoes at Nike, great for him. But I feel like, you're not changing anything. I want to do something. I want to make people's lives better. I really enjoyed developing and implementing interventions. And while that can be really challenging to implement something in a really large hospital, you get to know a lot of people. You start to understand how to interact with people, how to get your message across. And that was a lot of learning there. I really enjoyed measuring the impact of those interventions to know that what I've done, what I've put all of my effort into has actually made a difference, has made things better for our patients. I really, really enjoyed collaborating with a multidisciplinary team, working with pharmacists, with physicians, with nurses, and now I work in more of a digital health space, so working with software developers, working with user interface designers. It's really interesting to work with people from across all different areas and to work together to come up with a plan. I like data. I really quite enjoy sitting with an Excel spreadsheet. Or Starter. I enjoy that less, but I quite like it. So that if you like data, research could be for you. And I really started to get a bit of a taste for digital health through the sepsis scaling collaboration project, because we were trying to implement a sepsis pathway in our EMR. So working with sort of digital teams, I quite enjoyed. So that was why I thought maybe research was for me. So what am I doing now? I am doing a PhD in antifungal stewardship. I've done a systematic review, which was a really good learning experience around how to do a proper systematic review. Currently working on writing a narrative review around tools for antifungal stewardship. I got to do a Delphi survey, which is a really interesting research methodology to get international consensus from experts around the world. That was a really great learning experience. I've worked with a big team to develop the antifungal NAPS module and worked with the technical team over at Guidance across the road at Royal Melbourne to get like up and running. I ran a validation and integrated reliability study by developing some case vignettes and getting lots of different people to assess them and to see if we are consistent in the way that we assess appropriateness and what we can do to improve that for our for the users of the antifungal NAPS, and also doing some quantitative data analysis looking at 10 years of hospital NAPS data of antifungal prescribing and looking at our antifungal NAPS data. So that's the PhD side of things. But so the PhD is sort of I'm doing on a part-time basis. So the other half of what I do is a project more in digital health around the automated surveillance of invasive fungal infection. So I think coming in here with pharmacy background gives you a lot of knowledge and a lot of skills. But there's so many things that I've really learned. I've learned about the process of co-design and how to work with potential users of a digital health system to understand what their needs are and how we can translate that into an actual product. Done a lot of work around EMR data extraction and validation of that data extraction, which again, if you like data and spreadsheets, that's quite enjoyable, I guess. We've done some work around natural language processing with data scientists to actually annotate text reports to be able to automate detection of infection in these reports. We're working to develop algorithms for the detection of invasive fungal infection. We've done a lot of work around design and development of an application and working really closely with the development team at the moment to get this product up and running. We've been working with a team of data people to design a database, which has been really interesting learning and really enjoyable for me. We're also moving to space of evaluating the tool. As I mentioned before, it's multidisciplinary, so many different people working together to achieve the same goal, same outcome, and I really enjoy that. And as I said, I do like the area of digital health. How did I first get involved?
I sort of mentioned it. There was an NHMRC grant and there was a project officer role advertised at a time that was right for me. The sepsis job was coming to an end of the Alfred. I was looking at potentially going back to working in orthopedics or something terrible like that. So I was looking for something that would keep me in ID and keep me interested. So I was lucky to get that role here at the NCIC, and then shortly after the PhD opportunity presented, and I'm really glad that I did take that up. How will research benefit my career? It's really helped me to identify my key areas of interest. I've really learned that I love digital health, particularly in the AMS, ID and quality spaces. So I want to focus on these areas as time goes on. I've developed a lot of skills in research, expertise in certain areas. You know, you get connections in the industry. I've had exposure and experience with writing grants so that in the future can secure funding ongoing for my own research as time goes on. So that's about all I wanted to say.
Thanks so much, Anna. Invite any questions from the audience online or in person. Courtney, yep, Courtney.
Great talk, Anna. What do you find most challenging about managing doing PhD part-time and then managing projects part-time?
Do you want to repeat that just in case?
Yes, so the question was, what do I find challenging about doing a PhD part-time and projects part-time? I think actually it's been a really nice combination because you're not, you get a bit of variety. You're not very much in one area all of the time. I've got the two kind of things that I get to work on that are different and interesting in different ways. So I think actually rather than being a challenge, it's been a really positive thing. And I'm really glad that I get to do both of those things at the same time.
Yeah.
Kind of to follow on with Courtney's, how do you manage? I mean, you talk a lot about managing clinical or projects and doing PhD and potentially having one of the. How do you manage and be able to still stay sane? Doing it all, just to encourage people who might be thinking, because obviously, people talk about PhDs and how much work there is to do, but to encourage those who might.
Sure. I'd also highlight the fact that you're a mum and you've had a baby during a PhD. So there's lots of things to juggle. Yeah.
I think being organized is so important. I think a lot of pharmacists are organized, so that makes it a little bit easier. So I think I know exactly what I'm working on, and I know every day I have a plan of what I'm going to achieve today, and I work to achieve that. So I think for me, being organized and having a plan and understanding, timelines and working towards that, I think for me, it's manageable. Yeah.
I know it sounds like a bit of a joke, but all of you are really efficient in what you do. You are really good project managers. You have every right to pursue an academic career because of what you do. Every right compared to, registrars that go into PhDs. So you have every right to take this opportunity and try and think about it as furthering or extending your role where you are. So if you are in an environment where you admire or really enjoy some aspect of it, speak to the teams in that and say, look, I'm actually quite interested in doing some research. And then what will happen is you'll flow into an opportunity where you are doing research, but also working in it, which is what Anna's doing, which is what Court, you came into NCAS, but you've extended CAS, take advantage of the environment that you're in. Now, if you're not in that environment, that's a harder thing. And actually going to a very, very different area when you're trying to do another clinical role, that is hard. So talk to people about how you do it. Because a lot of what other people would do is they probably move institutions to go close to where the experts were than try to do it in reality. So, you have to go to your tribe. You'll be most happy if you're in a tribe, and it just so happens NCIC is a fantastic tribe because, it is we're a really close-knit research group. Not everywhere's like that. So it sounds very idyllic, doesn't it? But in reality, it's not like that everywhere. but you have to find your passion and where you want to be to do that. And sometimes that's a big decision. So for Anna to come across town, you took ages to make your mind up. But anyway, it's a good decision. No. Thanks to Zohal. I think he gave her a bit of a push, didn't you? Was it? But anyway, no, it's a big decision. I'm not discounting it. It's a massive decision, but you can actually make it work quite well.
Denali has a
Denali.
question for Anna.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. And I wanted to ask, doing your PhD part-time, do you find that your non-PhD work encroaches on your time that you sort of allocated or tried to carve out for your PhD time, and then vice versa? Does it all come out in the wash, or do you find that your work-life balance kind of goes down the toilet because you're trying to do it all at that, type A personality, really good level? And I guess my question is, how do you really draw that line between the two? And is that possible at all?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like there'll be times where I'm have a whole lot of things to do in one area. And so, my surveillance project gets a little bit quiet because I don't have time for it. And there'll be times where the antifungal stuff is a bit quieter and I'm really focused on the surveillance stuff. So there are times, but at the end of the day, it probably balances out. And I think that I'm lucky that I work in a team where, I'm trusted to get the work done that I need to get done, and I'm not being watched or monitored very closely, or being pressured. That I'm trusted to get done what I need to get done, which makes it a lot easier. I think having a kid means that when I go home, I want to spend time with him, and then when he's in bed, I'm tired. So I don't really have a whole lot of time. So I have to be sure that I'm as efficient as I can be in my work time, because I know that at home I don't want to do too much. I don't have the energy, and yeah. So I think I just make sure that my work time is as productive as it can be.
Amazing. Any other questions for Anna? Otherwise, we might move forward with speakers. Thanks so much, Anna, for a great talk and really insightful. Thank you. Okay, so next up we have Karen Ivanchik, who is a wonderful pharmacist currently working in the immunocompromised host ID role, pharmacist role at Austin Health, and has had extensive experience for 15 years in ID and AMS, working across disciplines, including solid organ transplant, as well as hematology and ID, and has recently returned to her PhD about optimizing antifungal use in ICH, and is a great example again of a working parent and researcher. Thanks so much, Karen.
Oh my God, can you please do something here?
Oh yeah, just leave you to it. Yeah, maybe I'm not the one to be trusted about this. Is the other thing we should say.
Generation.
You should have an exam on.
Sorry, I also didn't get the memo of using the NCIC.
No, that was different.
Different color scheme. Soothing green. All right, well, thanks for the opportunity to talk today or tonight. It's a very nice view from up here. For those of you at home, too bad. I was going to entitle this talk My Brilliant Career, but let's just not get too far ahead. So my pharmacy research pathway is. So just to summarize in a nice, neat pictorial, I shudder to think that I finished my Bachelor of Pharmacy in 2000, the year 2000. Y2K was on the horizon. And I did my internship in 2001. Stop doing the maths, people in the audience. I did a residency back when residencies were a new thing, and not brought back for the second round, with SHPA. And then I sort of took a little bit of time to start my Masters of Clinical Pharmacy with Monash. and I did a little bit of research during that time. And I think I was focused in, like a couple of people in on hematology oncology. That was kind of the theme, must have been. And then I like to call my clinical workhorse years were had after that. So I worked in a lot of different clinical areas. In the emergency department, I worked in intensive care. I worked a bit in hematology oncology, and then I landed myself a role in infectious diseases and AMS in 2010 when some people were finishing their bachelor's pharmacy. And then I stayed there. And all this time, mind you, I was at the Austin. So I'm a stayer, and I even have a badge, 20-year badge to prove it. And that's at 5 years old. A 20-year badge. So yes, so a lot of my training has really been on the job in research, in clinical skills, and honing both of those at the one hospital. So in about 2016, after I'd sort of settled in hard in infectious diseases and AMS, I think I was looking for something a little bit more meaty to do in research. I was thinking about PhD, looking at all the doctors passing me, coming back as consultants and finishing off their PhD and thinking about what if I did that? And so what made me consider research? Well, a lot of frustrations and challenges with my job in ID and AMS, because I was doing a lot of research within that role. So I was asking clinical questions, and I was having a lot of fun doing the literature reviews and answering those questions within the ID clinical meetings. And every time the running joke was every time someone had a crazy plan for a patient, they would look at me and I would involuntarily roll my eyes. And if that happened, then I needed to do a literature review to solve the problem. So I loved meaty clinical questions. So that was just in my blood. I was implementing health service changes and then I had to show the benefits, I guess, from a health services point of view, from the exec point of view, from my boss's point of view. So that's a plural boss's point of view, working within and across infectious diseases and pharmacy and even hematology. And that's a story for another day. But also forming interdepartmental relationships, whether I liked it or not. One of my first projects, I guess, meaty projects in infectious diseases was trying to sort out the antifungals within the hematology department and why we were using so much antifungals. And that's a common theme, I guess, with stewardship. And having two bigwigs in one very small office and me in the middle trying to work out a plan for optimizing antifungals within a department or across a department. So that was my foray into implementing guidelines and then reviewing that process. And then, as you go along in your career, you get to take part in other people's research projects, and you get recruited to collect data for their research or for your colleagues' research, and you get to see how they want you to collect data. How so they're going, yes, collect data for me, but you get to see how they collect data, how they analyze data, and how they present it. And so that gives you ideas about how you might do that. So that was sort of being collected along the way. And all of that helped me to identify gaps in my knowledge, and gaps in the knowledge in the literature, and gaps in my skills, which I thought maybe research might or a PhD might help And so how did I first get involved in research? Well, it was by default. Please see the previous slide. And my mentors and my leaders were pushing me to take part. At that time, it wasn't in my job description, but as you'll see, I wrote it into my own job description later down the track. But it was all part and parcel of the role. And by being part of research, even in a small way, going to conferences, utilizing networks, whether that be through the pharmacy college or through SHPA or through going to meetings like tonight's meetings, talking to people about their PhDs, their research and opportunities that arise. And obviously, Kaz is the missing link in everyone's PhD. And as I said, now research is in my job description, and I very much wrote my job description. That's again, that if you want to email me, I'll give you that story. So my research interest very much starts with a love affair with fungus. So that people who know me know that I love antifungals, but I also like antibacterials. They're okay, and virals. They're cool. But I guess my research focuses on optimizing antimicrobial use in immunocompromised host cohorts, which is kind of my job title. But that sort of overarches, solid organ transplants and other transplant cohorts and hematology patients at the Austin. And there are sort of two branches that I'm looking at antimicrobial pharmacokinetics and application of therapeutic drug monitoring in the clinic, and looking at different cohorts where that might apply to, and looking at different antimicrobial stewardship models that can apply to different areas in the hospital and in our local hospital. So either pharmacist-led, whether that's pharmacist-led or whether that's multidisciplinary models that we can implement, whatever works really, and then evaluating them and seeing what works. So the pros and cons of embedding research into a pharmacy career, there are lots of pros, but I guess to summarize, there's lots of skills that are applicable outside the dispensary, and I guess to the detriment of my skills within the dispensary, because I don't think I'd be able to dispense a medication. So don't tell Francine Tanner, the director of pharmacy. But yeah, that's a skill that's lost, but there's certainly skills that can be applied elsewhere. And you can think of your career in pharmacy more broadly. Obviously, thinking critically about many aspects of your life, but also within pharmacy and within medicine, and sort of street cred, not just within the pharmacy, but outside. If you're working in a hospital environment, outside the pharmacy department, within different departments, that's always helpful when you're in different rooms and meetings. And it's also great in terms of thinking about leadership career pathways outside of the standard management pathways in pharmacy, especially in hospital pharmacy. When I started in 2000, there was just one management pathway to the director of pharmacy, and I wasn't up for that. So it's great that that's a pathway that people can go for. And the cons, well, if you like to sleep, forget about it. Don't worry about research. But if you can push through, then definitely research is helpful. So that's all I wanted to talk about. I'm up for any chats about work-life balance, single parenting balance with research, and my email's there. Happy to take questions. Oh, yeah. No. Stop sharing. Stop. Yeah, stop sharing. Good. I'm probably saying up my nose.
Thanks so much, Karen. It was a great talk. Yeah, I think any questions in the audience here or online? Otherwise, I think I respect your comments about, there are cons, of course, and there's, you've got to think about what kind of person and what you want out of things. I think I'm actually forgetting what I was going to try to.
You need a bit of sleep. I think someone's fallen asleep. We've got a question in the audience.
Was it you mentioned that you developed into your job research, so it must be the hospital that maybe wasn't designed so much to have, research pharmacists and stuff. Did you have much challenge in that? And then some of us might not have that opportunity. Do you find it a challenge?
Well, not really, to be honest. Just the way that infectious diseases and pharmacy are well married at the Austin. Our roles have developed along the way, and so research has never been. We certainly have research roles in pharmacy, but they're specifically within the pharmacy department, as opposed to, I guess there's more and more roles working outside of pharmacy within the clinical specialties these days. But infectious diseases, at least at Austin, has sort of paved the way for that to happen. And so my role is very niche within ID, and that was specifically developed because of the different specialties at Austin and the growing need for it. Yep, sure.
That you're employed by ID or you're employed by pharmacy?
The boss is pharmacy. The money comes from pharmacy. Sorry, the question was to do with where my role sits within. So it's very much within pharmacy. I guess my boss sits in pharmacy, but we very much literally sit within ID, and where we sort of all our projects are run through ID with pharmacy input.
So with the oncology, but we're still funded by
Yeah, so oncology is another good example of where the specialty, I guess, the relationship between pharmacy and the clinical specialty, it thrives more when it's run through the clinical specialty rather than being based in pharmacy. Okay. Yeah, Sonia.
Balancing work life, how do you do it? In single parent.
Poorly. Well, it's very difficult. And it's a bit easier now that said child is in school. But with a lot of help. It's really relies on family help. So, and luckily Connor is able to stay up late at night. We've still got to make cupcakes for his birthday party tomorrow.
I should mention that lovely Connor's here, and he's been such a good boy sitting in the audience. So great poster child for for pharmacy. Thanks so much. Any more questions? Good. Okay. Thank you. All right. We are up to numbers. Yeah. So this is Julian. Yeah, I'll get Nicole to help. So while Nicole's just getting things set up, we'll have a recorded presentation by Julian Lindsay because he's flying high in Seattle because he's a postdoctoral research fellow at Fred Hutch. in Washington, Seattle, Washington, in conjunction with the NCIC, and was previously a senior bone marrow transplant pharmacist in Sydney. And his research specialises in infection prevention in stem cell transplant and hematologic malignancy. And he has experience in invasive fungal prophylaxis, CMV, and EBV, and we'll look forward to his talk.
I thought that advanced clinical.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Kat.
Practice and research was for me, and I enrolled in a
Not
master's.
sure what's going on there. Oh, yeah. Hmm. I'm just gonna
Clinical pharmacy through one.
make sure everyone can hear that. Oh, you can? Okay. I'll just start it from
National
there.
University, which was a really great foundation for learning research skills and advanced clinical practice, obviously. So during the end of that period, I actually took a job in BMT down at Royal North Shore Hospital in Sydney, this hospital here. And that's me as a bright, young BMT pharmacist without one single grey hair in my beard, which I don't think is a coincidence. It was what I looked like before my PhD. Now, that was a really great job opportunity for me to get into research because I had a lot of support. And part of the job description was to do research within that patient population with forms of like looking into key performance indicators and protocol changes. And so with my skills that I learned in the master's clinical pharmacy, I was able to start doing small research projects within the department, within that patient population. Things like when we wanted to do a protocol change, looking at before and after that protocol change. And that got me into publishing that research as in conferences, through posters and small impact journals. And after doing that for a good 5-ish years, I decided I wanted to further that and further my research career, and I enrolled in a PhD around 2018. And I actually chose to enroll at the University of Melbourne in conjunction with the NCIC. And I'll get a little bit more into this and the personnel and why I chose that rather than a more local university. But that was a really amazing opportunity for me. And I started enrolling in the PhD meant that I was able to expand that the resources I had. I was able to expand those studies to be multi-site studies. I started the PhD part-time and continued working full-time in my clinical capacity. And that's more financially difficult. You don't get any support when you're enrolling part-time. However, it meant that I had more time to choose the research projects, contact people at different sites, and time for ethics and governance to go through, which takes a lot of time, especially for multi-site. And I thought that was actually really advantageous for my research to have that extra time. Then about halfway, after a couple of years of doing that, my supervisors were able to put me in contact with some people at the Fred Hutch here in Seattle. And the reason for that is because my research was all based in transplantation, and the Fred Hutch is essentially was the first site internationally to do allogeneic stem cell transplants and has amazing resources and a huge patient number to be able to work with. And after many grants and applications being knocked back, I finally was able to get an award from the Leukemia Foundation at HSNZ to fund me doing the PhD full-time and coming over to Seattle to finish the PhD. And I did that in 2020. And then from there, I actually was able to stay here. And after my PhD, I received a postdoctoral fellowship, which is funded through the NIH here. It's a T32 fellowship, and that's where I am now. So my research interests and what I've done, my PhD topic was actually very broad. It was strategies for preventing opportunistic infections in patients with hematological malignancies, HCT. So as PhDs go, that's really broad. And I had to split it into lots of chunks that were relevant. So PhD started looking at the incidence of morbidity and mortality, and that was infection-related mortality study that I did using the ABMTRR database, or Australian Bone Marrow Transplant Registry database. I also looked at risk factors for infections in this patient population. That consisted of a few different retrospective studies, CLAG-M, which is essentially the intensive induction regimen they use here upfront in AML. So I looked at the invasive fungal disease for that regimen. Also looking at incidence of CMV and EBV in the transplant population. This was actually the studies that I started off with while I was still working as the BMT pharmacist. The CMV is a single site study of just Royal North Shore Hospital. EBV then expanded to be Royal North Shore Hospital and Royal Melbourne Hospital. I looked at voriconazole usage here for Fred Hutch as well. And then focusing even more, I looked at optimizing precision medicines in ways to prevent infections, and that led me to the studies like the use of subetrotronidazole for prophylaxis in allo patients, a pilot study of CYP2C19 testing, and that led on to what I'm doing now, which is a big randomized controlled trial of upfront 2C19 testing for voriconazole in patients with hematological malignancy versus standard of care arm. And I can get a little bit more into that later if I have time. So I think research project selection is essential when going into research. You can't just start straight off the bat with a randomized controlled trial. So in early career or when you're still working clinically, it's important to select studies that are retrospective, single center, small sample size, and to present this as a conference poster or a low impact journal. So an example of that would be what I explained, the instance of CMV at a single site. We were looking into the use of letermovir, the use of what level of CMV to start preemptive therapy. And so it was a great chance to have a look back and look at the analysis and analyze that data and present that. And I had some great collaborators to help with statistics. So I had to learn a lot of that to do that myself, but then there was also, I had statistical help to check that what I was doing was correct. Then later in my research career, where I didn't have a clinical workload and I'm now a full-time researcher, I'm able to do more prospective, multi-site randomized control studies. An example of this is the pragmatic study that we have. We're starting up right now, like I said, a randomized control study with sites in Australia as well as over here in Seattle. And that is definitely a full-time job. I cannot underestimate how much work that goes into starting a randomized control trial. So I think mentors and supervisors are essential for a career in research. Like I said, I was working in the Sydney hospital, and after doing that research using my skills from a master's of clinical pharmacy and wanted to start a PhD, I first contacted the University of Sydney team and the main contact just via looking up who that was. And I was lucky enough that he actually said, well, Monica Slavin down at the University of Melbourne and has just started the NCIC, whose aims of that institute actually align exactly with what your PhD aims are. And that was more important than just being geographically close as far as the location goes. And that was a really great opportunity for me. So then I contacted Professor Slavin. I contacted Dr. Kong, who was a pharmacist with Monash University, because I knew that if I was going to have a primary supervisor as an ID doctor, I would need to have a pharmacist. And the other sort of great supervisor that I had, which essential, was Dr. Greenwood, was the head of transplantation where I was working when I started the PhD. And I think having your boss as one of those supervisors is great, because if the clinical workload is high and you don't have much time, they understand. And they can also try and allocate a little bit more time to go towards your research when that's needed and to take you out of the clinical workload. So it's always a juggle, especially when you're starting off. Then I also reached out to another ID physician at Westmead to look into multi-site studies, so Professor Sharon Chen. And then later on, as I was expanding to international, looking at doing research over here, Professor Slavin got me in contact with two amazing supervisors here at the Hutch, Catherine Hill and Steve Hogan. And I'm still working under them today. So the main benefits and drawbacks from my experience in research has been that it's arguably really exciting work. I love doing it. You probably also like research if you are logging in to watch these talks. And it's meant that I've been able to expand my career to work at international sites outside of Australia. The Australian pharmacy degree to work clinically is very difficult to translate internationally, whereas a PhD is recognised all over the world. And so, bar funding, there's a lot of opportunities in research and also in Australia as both research and clinical work. The drawbacks, however, have been that there is an increased workload, especially in the beginning, as you can't fund the research through because you're just starting off and getting that portfolio up. And so, like I did, I had to work full-time and do the research part-time until I found a pathway for funding that research. And that is really difficult for pharmacists. There's less you look at a clinical job and they're advertised, you apply for it and you take it to work clinically. Whereas ways to fund a research career is not as simple. There's different grants, there's different fellowships. They're not advertised like a standard clinical job are. And so that's one challenging part of it. And it takes time and it takes meeting a lot of people. And it also, when it comes down to it, means that you have a reduced pay in the beginning. And still now as a researcher, as a postdoctoral fellow here, I'm learning a lot less than I would as an advanced practice pharmacist. But I like doing the research work. And obviously there is less clinical work involved. You only have so much time in the day, you can't do all the clinical work and see as many patients. So there are both pros and cons to doing research, but I definitely really enjoyed my journey so far and looking forward to where it's taking me. So that was a very brief overview. If there's any questions, I'm more than happy to reply to an email. I put my Fred Hutch email up there. Anyone can contact me. I'm sorry I can't be there in person today, but it's well past my bedtime. But thank you for listening and shoot any emails if you have questions. Thank you. Hi, my name's Julian Lindsay.
Oh, here we go. Now we hear the start of it. Okay. Let's stop sharing. Okay. So obviously, yeah, Julian not present to take questions, but seems very keen to engage online and via email. So please do. All right, last but not least, we have Courtney Iorano, who is a AMS ID pharmacist at the NCAS, National Centre for Antimicrobial Stewardship at the University of Melbourne and Royal Melbourne Guidance Group. And she completed her PhD in 2020, exploring the quality of antimicrobial use in surgery. And she's currently working as a postdoc with research interest in AMS, digital health, implementation science and health services research. And so this is our final speaker, Courtney, and welcome. Thank you.
I do talk pretty quick anyway, but I'll try speed it up.
Now, I'm not sure if
yeah, tech support.
Yes, it's very annoying.
Oh, that'll do.
Oh.
Cool.
Oh.
Yeah. Yay. Seventh presenter, got the Zoom perfect now. All righty. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here so late on a school night. It's really nice to see so many people in the room and online. It's a great opportunity to have everyone together. So thanks to NCIC gang for bringing us all together. My research journey or my career in general is not a straightforward one. But as you can see from today, everyone else's path has been not a stock standard path, and we're all ended up in the same place or working towards the same goal. So if today doesn't feel applicable to you at all or elements of it, like that's kind of the point, and that's okay. So my journey, bit about me. I'm also not from here, but I've lived in Melbourne 8 years now, and I wear a lot of black. So I feel like I've slowly fitted in. I'm from regional New South Wales, so regionally raised and trained. And if you've ever worked with me, you'll know whenever I've gone home, because I come back with a bag of oranges or local produce or some salami or whatever Dad's made into the office. I did my undergrad pharmacy degree also regionally in Wagga Wagga. So I moved to the big smoke of Wagga to do my pharmacy degree. I graduated with class 1 honours there, and that had a built-in research project. So even through my undergrad degree is where I was first exposed to research, looking at reviewing drug charts and how adverse drug reactions were poorly documented. And in hindsight now, it was kind of an insight into penicillin allergies and all the problems that I didn't even realize that would be part of my career now as well. I did my internship at Albury-Wodonga Health. And whilst I was doing that, I did the Monash Uni Intern Training Program. And then when I finished that, I converted that into a grad cert in pharmacy practice, mainly because I really wanted to do that infectious diseases pharmacotherapy subject. And then after my intern year, there wasn't going straight into a job. So I did a combination of jobs. I worked as a clinical pharmacist in Young, which is in that top dot. But then also 3 hours away, I got a job part-time setting up the AMS program for Albury-Wodonga as well. And then I did a little bit of community work in Wagga. So I was doing around 500, 600 kilometres a week, driving around to get a full-time job in pharmacy. But sometimes that's just what you got to do when you're in regional areas. So why research? Specifically for stewardship, as a rural pharmacist, antibiotics were prescribed wherever you worked. I liked that it was so general for no matter where you worked, but also so specific that you have to use the right drug for the right indication. And it's not just the drug, it's the dose, it's everything about it. So I liked, from a learning perspective, that, yeah, it would come out like, I didn't envision moving to Melbourne at that point. So I liked that no matter what I was going to do, if I could learn about this, I'd have a good breadth of knowledge. And also interested in improving patient quality and safety. Those are things that came up within my early years. And an interest in stewardship and infectious diseases, despite not having that much exposure to it in the setting that I was. So I really wanted more training in stewardship and ID, but how, where? At that time, there wasn't that many things available. There wasn't fellowships. There was not as many courses. There was the grad cert subject that I was very keen to pursue, just to get as much knowledge as I possibly could. And then other element is just that I've always been a little bit of a nerd. I've enjoyed learning new things, challenging myself, trying new things. So for me, it's a lot of luck and being in the right place at the right time. So most of the people in the room will be familiar with this. So this, the national standards brought out the infection control on standard 3 on stewardship. So back in early 2012, 2013, a lot of hospitals were starting to implement AMS programs, leading to more funding for AMS positions. And that's sort of where I was in my career as well. I think it was 2015, then I got the AMS position at Albury-Wodonga Health. So again, right place, right time. And then also the NHMRC Centre of Research Excellence funding came out in 2015, and the National Centre for Antimicrobial Stewardship was born. So for those not familiar, the NHMRC is a major funding body for research in Australia. They do fund lots and lots of different types of grants, but a Centre of Research Excellence is a lot about building research capacity. So Kaz, who you should all know from today, was the lead investigator of this NCAS. And with that came specific funding for PhD students. I did see them advertised, and what's probably been a detriment to my career all along is imposter syndrome. I saw it and I thought, oh, no way, I'm way too junior. Like, I'm not even going to bother applying. Like, that just seems like so out of reach. But I had really supportive workplace mentors. So both at Albury Wodonga and Young, they're like, of course you can do it. Like, why not? You only have to apply. So I did. And it's been nonstop since. So I did the interview. And going back to that at the time, I was like, oh my God, it was so daunting. Like, as part of the submission, it was like, send us an attachment of all your publications. And I had a Word document with one paper, like just one set, like 2 sentences of my honours project. And I was, yeah, very overwhelmed. And then in the interview, they're like, so why do you want to do a PhD? And I was like, oh, I Googled it, and all the internet would tell me was that why I shouldn't do a PhD, and it's depressing and lonely and lots of work and no money. But I still think I want to do it. And what was the most reassuring thing from Kaz has spoken about that today as well. She's like, we're not like that. And it's all about mentorship and support and a family essentially, and being part of the CRE was perfect timing because there was multiple PhDs starting at the same time. So whilst I was very overwhelmed, there was 4 or 5 other people that were very overwhelmed at the same time. So we had our own little support group. My scholarship was specifically on surgical AMS. And it was sort of nice to have a carved out concept because obviously AMS is such a broad topic. But as I got more confident as a researcher, I sort of helped carve out what that PhD looked like over time as well. Unfortunately, at the end of that, as we mentioned, it's all contingent on funding. There wasn't a full-time job for me. Kaz was happy to keep me on as much as she could, but I'd been poor for so long, I really wanted a full-time job. I was a casual clinical pharmacist whilst doing my PhD. So I was working at the Alfred whilst doing my PhD. And then the opportunity arose for an advanced training residency with the Alfred on infectious diseases. And for me, whilst it was going back to clinical, it had a little bit of research, but for me and my knowledge gaps, I knew that, okay, I developed so many skills through my PhD. I did it quite early on in my clinical career. This is just a good opportunity for me to try and consolidate some of that knowledge. And obviously infectious diseases at a quaternary hospital in Melbourne is a little bit different to what you see in a small regional hospital. And recognizing I'm not, 2 years there is not going to capture 20 years of what Karen's achieved at the Austin, but it was a small step in that right direction. So I did that. And whilst I was doing that, I was still doing projects with the NCAS, still keeping in touch, working on some grants to hopefully get a job for me to come back. And that's what Kaz talks about, effective mentorship. So that did bring me back when I finished my fellowship. So I am in a part-time role where I'm part-time research as a postdoctorate fellow, and then part-time through the RMH guidance group as a clinical project manager overseeing NAPS and a range of research projects with them as well. And I think that works well for the flexibility. Full-time academia, I don't think is for me. I do like having the balance of both. I think throughout my whole career, I've hardly ever done just one thing. So I think it suits me perfectly to be a little bit chaotic and do multiple things at once. Doesn't work for everyone, but it's turned out okay for me so far. And then since being back, it's been really, really good. So like riding Kaz's bandwagon, I've been able to contribute and be successful with nearly $6 million in research funding, definitely not on my own as part of a team. I've got over 20 research publications. I've contributed to the NAPS public reports. I currently have 2 PhD students. I've supervised medical students and I'm a mentor to some PhD students as well. I'm actively involved in our education. If you've probably seen all our NCAS seminars and Antibiotic Awareness Week events and all other bits and pieces, increasing my role in consumer engagement and all the opportunities of being where I am. And Kaz likes to nominate me to do lots of things as well. So I'm also involved with like professional bodies like SHPA, doing work with Monash University. I'm on the board for the Australian Society of Antimicrobials and all the fun bits that come with just being involved in the stewardship space in Australia. So, what have I gained from doing research? It's capitalized on my interests, and it's branched out a bit and also expanded my skills. So it's being a pharmacist, quality improvement, and what started with AMS, ID and surgery has branched out even more. NCAS is a One Health collaborative. So I've now as a postdoc, I'm doing more research with vets in the veterinary space. I'm helping lead a dental stewardship pilot, collaborating with our colleagues in primary care, aged care, and so forth. I find it really rewarding and to work with clinicians that we all have that common goal but work across different settings. And similarly in infection prevention, capitalizing on my interest in education and building up capacity of not just pharmacists, but other researchers like nurses, and also a bit of international work too. In terms of the PhD sort of skills, so my PhD program, I got to learn a whole new range of qualitative skills as well as building upon quantitative skills. I've learned to, like Anna, I do have quite an interest in data science in the digital health space. I'm learning about Delphi consensus methodologies, co-design thinking, implementation science and behavior, and how they all link in from a research perspective. And then in terms of the more practical skills, I spent a lot of time grant writing, critically appraising the literature, problem solving, and then all those other big important skills like managing your time, managing projects, and working on my communication. So in terms of pros and cons of a career in research, I think it's a pro. There's always something new. There's always something to learn. You'll master one sort of skill, but then something will happen, it'll change, and then there'll be another thing to learn. There's always something to do. It's a good opportunity to collaborate with others to bring out positive change. And I think we're all in that space of wanting to improve patient care as our ultimate goal. I've slowly become more independent and grown on my own as a researcher, and I get to work with some of the smartest people you'll ever meet. So I think that's really cool. And there's countless opportunities, as I've mentioned. And if you're in the right space, the right environment, Kaz keeps throwing those opportunities at me. So cons, yeah, it didn't happen overnight. Like, I did my PhD and there wasn't like, oh, yep, here's a brand spanking new full-time research role with X amount of money and all these things. Like, it just doesn't always happen that way. And I think the benefit of still being a pharmacist and keeping my other clinical roles and other hats has helped supplement me to get to this point. But also not just that takes time, like the career part just takes time, but research takes time too. Ethics submissions can take months. Collecting data can take months. It's just a process. And I think if you're happy to take the time, it is worth it. There's many steep learning curves, not a bad thing, but just recognizing that there is just a lot to learn in possibly a short time. But if you're willing to rise to the challenge, it can be very rewarding. Obviously contingent on funding, which, as part of your PhD, you get better at writing, you'll get exposed to learning how to write grants to help secure your own funding over time, hopefully. But also, unfortunately, the way of research, you can write a beautiful application and sometimes it's just not good enough. And that just sucks. But that is also just, unfortunately, part of the way academia and research works. Work-life balance, I haven't worked that one out yet, but I feel like that could be in any job anyway. So it's not specifically bad for research. Obviously, when you're part-time, I think what's worked well is being part-time in a project role and a research role. I can appreciate it would be harder to block out the time if you were part-time clinical and part-time research, because when you're clinical, the ward is 8 till 5. Like that is, you can't just sneak off and, oh, I'm just going to review a paper in that spare time. It's hard to have the roles blend, but people do make it work. That's just my personal preference. And there isn't always a clear path forward. So if you really are fixated on having a very clear, perfect path and timeline, research might not necessarily be for you, because you get thrown things at you left, right, and center. And I don't mind the chaos, but each to their own. And then a shameless plug, because as part of my education research role, and Kaz will kill me for saying this, but you don't have to have a PhD to do research. Lots of people here today, here online, are interested in doing research as part of their role. And, you know, you're not going to, you might be interested in looking at a PhD, but yeah, like sometimes those opportunities aren't right there readily available for you. So how can you implement research as part of your role? How, like Phoebe said, how do I go about the penicillin allergy delabeling project? How do we write that up as an abstract or a paper, or how can we formalize this going forward? And that's quite daunting, especially when you don't have that team of researchers working with you. So we are having an event for Antibiotic Awareness Week at the Doherty. It is in person only, and it's about building workforce capacity for research for stewardship. It's not exclusive to pharmacists, because stewardship is a multidisciplinary approach, and similarly from a One Health perspective too. So a sneak peek, because I only finished the website today, so there'll be registration links should be working. And happy for any other questions. I'm on Twitter or X, LinkedIn, email, floating around the precinct if you're here. So always happy to have a chat and answer any questions. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney, for a
All right.
wonderful talk.
Yeah, we dropped off a bit, I think.
Dropped off.
I scared off.
Yeah, look, obviously it's getting a bit of a late night now. So, but really excellent talk, Courtney. And any questions for Courtney online or in person? I think there's been so much information. I think it was a fantastic talk about it's a different kind of path you've taken, but you've made such a success of yourself, and it's great to end on such a high note with such a fantastic career. Just last opportunity for questions. Otherwise, we might end the night and let people have a mark and get home to their families. So, thanks everyone for joining today. So I should like to say that I would like to thank Nicole Singh, of course, and Kaz Thursky, as well as Michelle Yong and Violet as well, Zoo, for helping arrange tonight. So thank you so much for all your work.